At dawn, he walked the rim of the West Baray the same way he had walked it every morning for 20 years. The water tender checked the level against the marker stones, made his count, and moved to the next checkpoint. It was a small task in an enormous system, but in Angkor, the water was everything. By the time he finished his circuit and returned to the Eastern District, the city he had served his whole life would begin its final collapse. He did not know it. Nobody inside the walls did. It is the dry season, the year 1431. Angkor stands as the largest city on Earth, a metropolis of perhaps 1 million people spread across more than 1,000 square kilometers of paddy fields, canals, and stone temples in what is now northwestern Cambodia. Beyond the jungle to the west, the army of Siam has been camped outside the walls for 7 months. The signs had been building for years. The canals ran shallower each dry season than the one before. The great reservoirs that fed this city were contracting, filling with silt that no labor force remained to dredge. The traders from the south had stopped arriving. But the empire had endured raids before. It had survived sieges before. What nobody inside the walls knew that morning was that the system the city depended on had been failing long before the army arrived. Angkor's water management network would later turn out to be the exact thing that destroyed it. But in the early 12th century, when the first engineers began laying out the barays and the canal grids, it was simply the most ambitious civil engineering project in the medieval world. King Suryavarman II began construction of Angkor Wat around 1113. The temple complex covered more than 160 hectares and was oriented to the west, toward the setting sun, a deliberate departure from every other temple in the Khmer canon. When Jayavarman VII came to power in 1181, he transformed the capital into Angkor Thom, a walled city covering 9 square kilometers, with the great Bayon Temple at its center, its stone faces gazing outward from towers above the forest canopy. Researchers at the Greater Angkor Project, a collaboration between the University of Sydney and the École Française d'Extrême Orient, used satellite radar imaging in a study published in 2007 to document what the jungle had been concealing. A continuous urban landscape covering more than 1,000 square kilometers. At its peak, Angkor was larger than any city in medieval Europe. Historians estimate its population at between 750,000 and 1 million. Paris, in the same period, held perhaps 200,000 residents. Consider that for a moment. A city that size required food on a scale that only one mechanism could provide: a water management system that captured the annual monsoon and released it through the dry months in controlled quantities. The engineers of the Khmer Empire built exactly that. The West Baray alone, the reservoir the water tender circled each morning, stretched roughly 8 kilometers long. It was not just infrastructure. It was the reason 1 million people could live in the Cambodian interior. The same infrastructure was about to do what no army had managed. The Siamese kingdom of Ayutthaya had been growing to the west for decades. In 1351, a Siamese force occupied Angkor before being driven back. In 1393, they came again. The Khmer court rebuilt each time. The temples were still standing. The water system was still functioning. The empire would endure. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. In 2010, a climate scientist named Brendan Buckley and colleagues from the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory at Columbia University published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Using tree ring records from ancient trees across mainland Southeast Asia, the team reconstructed regional rainfall patterns going back 7 centuries. What the record showed was precise and alarming. The early 15th century was a period of severe and prolonged drought, punctuated by catastrophic flood years. The drought decades of the 1400s ranked among the worst in the regional record for 700 years. Angkor's hydraulic network had no margin for this. The system was built for a reliable monsoon cycle, not for decade-long failures. During the droughts, the barays dropped and the channels silted. During the floods, the overflow sluices that required careful management had no operators. The labor that should have been dredging had been redirected to military garrisons and to temple construction for a court that was still commissioning monuments while losing control of the water. This detail, the hydraulic network that had built an empire and was now being allowed to degrade, seemed manageable at the time. It was not. What comes next is the part that still does not make sense. The Siamese king Boromara Hathirat II arrived outside the walls of Angkor in late 1430. The Siamese chronicles record what followed. Khmer records from this period are fragmentary, a silence that is itself a form of evidence. According to the Siamese accounts, the blockade held for months before the city finally fell. 7 months is a long time to wait outside a city. It is also a long time to wait inside one. You are the water tender. It is early morning, somewhere in the middle of 1431. You have walked this rim before in worse dry seasons. The baray is lower than it was last year, lower than the year before that. The canal that carries overflow to the eastern paddies has been running shallow since before the siege began. You note the level against the marker stones. You move on. There is no one left who wants the report you are carrying. The court had been holding its position while the water system held its breath. The water system was done holding. In the middle of 1431, the court of the Khmer king made its decision. The royal household would retreat south, toward the Mekong Delta, toward what would eventually become Phnom Penh. The administrative structure of the most sophisticated urban civilization in medieval Southeast Asia folded itself up and departed. But this was not only about the court anymore. When a king leaves a city, the city begins to leave itself. The merchants follow the court's supply routes. The priests who maintain the temple shrines lose their patronage. The garrison becomes an army without a mission. The water tenders who walk the reservoir rims each morning have no one to report to, and no institution left to receive the report. The network of canals and reservoirs that had sustained the Khmer Empire's reach across mainland Southeast Asia for 3 centuries was now a system without operators. The same network that had built the city had been the central requirement for keeping it alive. Angkor did not collapse in a single morning. Researchers have debated for decades whether the siege of 1431 was the cause of abandonment or a final consequence of a decline already far advanced. Buckley's climate data and the survey work from the Greater Angkor project together suggest the latter. The hydraulic infrastructure had been degrading for a generation before the army arrived. The siege was the last weight on a structure already near the floor. The water tender who walked the baray that morning would look back on a decade of falling water lines and understand what those measurements had been building toward. Most people never hear about this part. After the court left, the jungle moved in at the rate that maintenance had been abandoned. Cambodia's forests are patient and thorough. Strangler sig roots descended through stone. Earth accumulated against walls that no maintenance crew came to clear. Within decades, temple corridors that had been public thoroughfares became impassable. Within a century, the city had receded to the point where a traveler moving through the interior would need to know precisely where to look. The Khmer people maintained a continuous presence in and around the site across the following centuries. Portuguese missionaries documented Angkor Wat in the 16th century. But the full extent of what lay beneath the vegetation was not recovered until the 19th century. In 1860, a French naturalist named Henri Mouot traveled into the Cambodian interior and encountered Angkor Wat. His illustrated account, published posthumously in 1863, described towers emerging from the forest canopy, stone faces looking down through the roots of trees, causeways still intact, still straight, still pointing west toward the setting sun. The king was centuries gone. The water tender was centuries gone. The beret was still there. Satellite imaging has allowed researchers to trace the full outline of Angkor's hydraulic network beneath the vegetation. The channels and reservoirs of a system designed to sustain 1 million people, visible from orbit after 600 years. The stone faces of the Bayon still gaze outward in 4 directions. Angkor Wat receives more than 2 million visitors each year. The causeways are intact. What the climate data and the satellite archaeology together showed was that Angkor did not fall because one army was stronger. It fell because the thing it was built on, the water and the labor and the administration that managed both, had been eroding for decades without anyone deciding that it required immediate attention. Which, looking back, made the end of Angkor something more like an ordinary institutional failure than a catastrophe. The most ordinary ending a civilization can have. The water tender who walked the rim of the West Beret in 1431 had been watching the waterline fall, one dry season at a time, for years. He noted the level. He moved on. He did what the job required. The ones who stayed through the siege, who watched the court depart and told themselves the empire had recovered from worse, held to one conviction: that the water would return, that the canals would fill, that the city had endured before and would endure again. What ended Angkor was not one catastrophic morning. It was the accumulation of 1,000 ordinary mornings, each one recorded against the marker stones, each one noted and forgotten by a system that had quietly stopped watching the whole. What endures is the stone. Angkor Wat stands. The Bayon stands. The causeways point west. And beneath the vegetation that outlasted the court by 4 centuries, the satellite traces show the outline of the water system that built one of the largest cities the world had ever produced, still legible, still there, 600 years after the last water tender left his post and did not come back. Subscribe. Next time, we spend the last day with another city the world forgot it had lost. The door stays open.